Yeah.
All right, we're off mute. Okay.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the March meeting of the Ulster County Transportation Council. This is the technical committee meeting. So we'll go around, let people in the room introduce themselves, and I'm going to ask Dave to read off the names of those folks that are on the meeting remotely. So my name is Dennis Doyle. I'm the planning director, also the director of the Transportation Council.
Amy McKenzie, New York State DOT.
Mike Baden, Town of Rochester. Colleen, Ulster County.
Ryan Slack, Ulster County Transportation Council.
Das, Ulster County Transportation Council. And then on the line, I'm just going to go down the line and let me get you guys over onto the screen so that way people in the room can see, hopefully. We have Cheryl Snyder, Chris Kate, Chris Hannett, James on an iPad, not sure, Jay Hubert, Laura Petit, Leanne Thornton, Peter Cristiano, Shelley Johnston, and the town of Gardner. There's also a USM 674084.
Yep, that's Martin Hull here at WSP.
Perfect. Thank you, Martin. And I just want to check to see if I missed anyone else when I was going down the line there.
Clarification, it's James Quigley from the town of Ulster.
Perfect. Didn't have your video there, Supervisor. Sorry. That was my me.
That's it. Thank you,
that's-
everyone. So number 2 on the agenda is call for citizens' comments. Any citizens' comments from anyone in the room?
My name is Barbara Judith. I'm from the town of Shoreditch. I live on Kings Highway. I'm following the development of Kings Highway and also a request for a study, a traffic study on Kings Highway, which I heard that is now going to be addressed today. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Any,
We have one from the line, Cheryl Snyder. I'm going to ask Cheryl to unmute.
Good
Oh.
morning, everybody. My name is Cheryl Schneider from the town of Rosendale, the hamlet of Bloomington. In reviewing the packet for this week, I'm looking at the financial plan, the 2023 update financial plan for 2020 to 2045. It is overwhelmingly 1.1 billion to almost 400 million is the ratio of motorized transportation to all other forms of transportation in this county. This goes through to 2045, which is a very long arc of time when we can foresee huge transitions in the way we move people and things around. And I want to just speak to a desire to see those ratios inverted at some point. Also, I want to speak to the fact that we are putting millions and millions and millions into trails, which is great. We already have a substantial trail system in our county, but again, I want to see more of this money going to help people get about their lives. People are living in rental situations in large complexes, and buses rarely, if ever, come to their complexes. People cannot get about their daily lives. It's grocery shopping, going to the pharmacy, going to doctors, just going to work. They can't do it reliably with our system. So I look very forward to working towards transitioning to a more human-based transit system. Thank you very much.
any other comments from people online?
Looks like Leanne Thornton may have her hand raised. I'm going to see if I can ask you to unmute and see if we can get that going.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to know if there's any push on the county level to have any specific regulations with regard to the e-bicycles. This came up after our STAC meeting last week from Chief Stenogra. I know in the town of New Paltz, they have passed a local legislation with regard to e-bikes. And I'm wondering if the county has any plans to get involved here with any kind of county legislation, or is it going to be left up to individual towns and villages to basically draft their own policy with regard to what type of roads they'll be allowed on, if it's going to be where any bicycles can travel? Is there, the state has a speed limit max of 30 miles per hour. Just wondering where the county stands on this, if they have taken a position.
We just a quick response. I'm not aware of the county taking position with respect to on-road travel. We are looking at what, in conversations with respect to the trail committee at the county level, looking at discussions with respect to their use on trail.
Okay. All right, thank you.
If I can add to that, this is Mike Baden. I sit on the Ulster County Trails Advisory Committee. And we have been discussing it within that body of whether to present any sort of recommendation to the legislature to request that it be considered. At this point, it's still in discussion within our own body of what form it should be and how to do it, but we are actively discussing that on a very regular basis.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think Supervisor Majestic, may have a comment?
Hi, good morning. I just want to get on the record. I've been getting some calls about a sinking bridge on Route 4455. The approaches, both east and westbound, have a huge dip. I had some gentleman tell me he almost lost his trailer. I fear for motorcyclists' lives with the nice weather coming up. I've mentioned this to the state DOT, and I'm just going to mention it so I get on the record wherever I can that this bridge is a problem and it better be looked into. I think it's on somebody's radar, but the timeline may not be work with the use of the bridge. Thank you.
Do you have a crossing, stream crossing for that bridge?
The Walk Hill River on 4455, right by Farmers Turnpike.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any other comments? Hearing none. Moving on to item 3, approval of January 24th, 2023 technical committee meeting summary. Do I have a motion for discussion purposes?
So moved by Baden.
Mr. Baden, do I have a second? Ed Pine is the second. Any discussion?
I don't see anyone raising their hand online.
Hearing none. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So carried. Thank you. Item number 4, communications and announcements. Brian?
Yes, thank you, Dennis. Later today or possibly early tomorrow, UCTC will send out an email blast to our distribution list with several items of interest. One is a memo that I've made available for everyone today, so it is in your packet. And that is regarding the use of UCTC's allocation of carbon reduction funds. The carbon reduction program is a new program made available through the bipartisan infrastructure law. And we have a direct sub-allocation, which is provided to metropolitan, it's provided to urbanized areas throughout New York State. So the memorandum, as I've written it, shows what the available funding is at this time. We have federal fiscal years 22 and 23 are available for immediate programming through the Transportation Improvement Program. So what we've decided to do, since we don't have any clear projects identified at this point in time, we are seeking expressions of interest from our members, which include all municipalities in Ulster County. If they have need or use or desire for these funds within their respective jurisdictions, or even outside their jurisdiction, if they think there's a project that they think is warranted. The rules of the program are attached in the memorandum. Eligible carbon reduction program project categories. I'll run through those categories very quickly. They include primarily transportation alternatives. Therefore, any project that is authorized through the Transportation Alternative Program is very likely eligible for these funds. Other types of projects include those that will reduce transportation emissions, traffic monitoring and management, public transportation projects, congestion management, intelligent transportation systems, and signalization that would decrease emissions and decrease motor vehicle idling are among the type of projects that are available. It's not a lot of money. just under $400,000 total federal, and there is a required 20% local match. The last point I'd like to make is that if municipalities have an existing project that is already programmed on the tip, and it does meet the eligibility criteria, these funds can be used to supplement or fill a gap if there's a current budget gap for a project. So it can be a new project or one already programmed on the transportation improvement program. This will go out today or tomorrow. If you have any further questions, please let me know. Just thought there is no deadline. I forgot to put a deadline, so I will update the memo before we send it out with a deadline. I figure about 4 weeks should be fine.
Brian, this will be sent to all the.
Yes, it's gonna go out to everyone.
Thank you.
Then along with that email distribution notice that we'll do, we did also want to notify folks about charging and fueling infrastructure opportunities are also being made available through the Federal Highway Administration. So we'll send that notice of funding opportunity out as well. That's
They
all
have to meet certain criteria.
Right, I haven't revealed the rules, but you had asked me to
Yeah.
distribute that to members, so we will do that.
So at the local level, if you're looking for charging and infrastructure, then it's something you should look into. I know Patterns also has a report out with respect to EV charging stations in the Hudson Valley. So you can use that report to take a look in terms of where in your community there are charging stations and where there aren't, or where you think you need them. I believe they have to be within a mile of a state route that's identified as a critical route. I believe they have, so the thruway, I think national highway systems are identified in terms of where they have to be. So not every community would be eligible. We'll make sure we check those eligibility.
Looks like there may be a comment on the line from Laura Petit. Might ask her to unmute.
Thank you. And you mentioned that you were going to be sending these funding opportunities or recommendation requests out. Will that just go to supervisors or everybody on this committee, or and will you have details on it? Because I think a lot of what you were saying went over my head, so I'd like to be able to read it.
It's in the packet, right?
Yes.
It's part, so
I believe.
legislator, you can check the packet that you received, the agenda packet. The memo should be included in that. If it's not, our apologies. We'll be sure to get that out. But yes, it's going to go to the full distribution list.
So it will be beyond just the highest elected officials. It will go out to technical committee folks as well.
Anything else, Laura?
And just one final note, if a community does want to express their interest, we are expecting a letter from the municipality signed by the highest elected official regarding what that interest may be. And depending on what responses we receive, we'll then plot our way forward on how to program the fund. So it's not a traditional call for project proposal. Right? We want to see what interest there is for the funding.
Any other communications and announcements, Brian?
No.
Okay, moving on to new business. Item A, draft resolution 2023-02, resolution to support New York State Department of Transportation NISDOT targets for performance measures related to bridge and pavement conditions on the national highway system and freight performance on the national highway system. I have a motion for discussion purposes. Mr. Prime made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second, Mike Bain.
Mr. Bates seconded. Any discussion? Brian?
Sure. So resolution 23-2 continues our compliance with the National Performance Management Program, which came into effect in 2013 under MAP 21 and was drawn forward through the FAST Act and is now continues to be the law of the land under the bipartisan infrastructure law. We will continue to utilize our option, as do all metropolitan planning organizations in New York State, to accept the New York State DOT's targets. The way the law is written is we can establish our own targets, but it makes much more sense to establish or rather accept the state targets for our system. So these are statewide performance targets. This particular performance measure, we generally refer to as the system performance measure. So we're looking at travel conditions on the national highway system. In Ulster County, the national highway system includes 9W, Route 28, Route 209, portions of the state system within the city of Kingston, Route 32, I believe. I mentioned 9W, of course, the New York State Thruway as well, and a few other roadway segments as well. The national highway system has been designated to essentially promote or establish national interests in terms of commerce and public safety, generally speaking. So the resolution, as it says on page 1, there are 4 main areas of focus that the system performance measures address. We're looking at bridge performance. These again are bridges on the national highway system. Pavement performance, system performance, which is a reference to congestion on the highway system, and freight performance. So I'm going to go through these briefly. If you refer to attachment 1, all the targets that the state is setting for the system are listed there. When the New York State DOT provides these targets to metropolitan planning organizations, we were provided essentially a 30-page manual that goes through all the details as to how these targets are established. I didn't think it made much sense to provide that manual to everyone, so I prepared some crib notes to walk us through what these targets essentially say. For the New York National Highway System bridge condition targets, the New York State DOT uses a structures management system, an SMS, to forecast future conditions based on delivery of projects that included on the state transportation improvement program. So short-term bridge condition trends, 2-year and 4-year targets, as they're shown in this table, are declining from current conditions. Typically, when we set targets over a course of period of time, we're hoping to improve conditions on the system. The DOT explains that the deterioration rate of bridges, which is affected by weather, bridge age, and traffic levels, is difficult to reverse given the projected budget the New York State currently has. Modeling runs indicate that funding levels for bridge construction must reach over $2 billion annually to reduce the deck area of poor NHS bridges to 10% or less in 10 years. Therefore, the poor condition level is projected to increase at this point in time. So essentially what we're talking about here is turning a freighter ship on a dime. Obviously, it takes a long time to turn around the system. We just received a massive investment of federal funds into the system through the bipartisan infrastructure law, and we expect that over time, the trend line will start to turn around on bridges. But right now, the investments are slow to turn the condition of bridges at this time, which is why the projection into year 4 is increasing. For pavements, state DOT indicates that significant progress in reducing the percent of poor pavements on the interstate system over the past 4-year period is evident. Given the needs of the water highway system, New York State DOT anticipates that they'll be able to hold those conditions relatively steady with only minor total increases in percent poor pavements year period. Moving on to reliability on the national highway system, the measure that is chosen, and this is a measure dictated by the Federal Highway Administration that the New York State DOT has to abide by, is percent person miles traveled that are reliability. When we think about congestion and being stuck in traffic on the highways, I think people have a lot of different interpretations of what congestion means. In this instance, travel time reliability essentially refers to the dependability in travel times day to day on our transportation system. And that's how this measurement works. It's the percent of time that travelers are finding consistency and dependability on the transportation system. So the trouble with this measure is we just came through the pandemic, and the DOT has indicated that trends in working from home, uncertain direction of the economy account for the variability of annual data. So therefore, the 24 and 26 values were decreased all the way down to 70%. This added margin is less than 10% of the value that was used for the initial first performance period target. So the baseline target of 82%, that should read 82.5%. I apologize. No, 82.2%. There's a typo there. That's the current condition in 2021. They're projecting it to get worse, but as the data essentially regulates itself, when we return to a post-pandemic normalcy, if there is such a thing, then we're expecting the data to also follow that trend. But for now, New York State DOT is indicating that they're only predicting 75% of travel time reliability. So we would expect the next time we update this measure.
Volumes increase, reliability goes down,
Yes,
essentially.
yeah, I think so. And then the final measure is freight performance measures on the interstate system. And this uses the measure of travel time reliability, truck travel time reliability, TTTR. This is an index measure. Essentially, we're looking at the index of the baseline level of 1.3 with the targeted measures of in 23 and 25 being 2. So an index of 2 represents the travel time on the worst day of the week is 2 times greater than the travel time on the average day. That's what that index number means. So the current baseline of 1.38 indicates, as measured using NISDOT's sources, is that the truck travel time and freight performance on the national highway system was 1.38 times worse than the average day of the week. That's
it.
good. And that's it. I'm sorry, those are relatively arcane measures. They took a bit of study on my part to get myself through them. But essentially, again, all 14 MPOs are accepting New York State DOT's system performance targets on the national highway system. And Ulster County Transportation Council, again, will accept them as well.
Any comments or questions in the room?
Brian, the TTCR, I understand it's kind of an obscure way to measure, but the 1.38 baseline, you say it's the average, I think was the word you used, or I apologize.
It represents the travel time on the worst day of the week, and the number of times greater than the travel time on an average day.
Okay.
So the higher the number, the worse
Understood.
it is, the condition is.
So the average day is based on what time frame?
So the data that's used is the National Performance Monitor, NPM RDS, which essentially is gives you 5-minute travel time. Yeah, it's like it's very detailed. It uses cell phone data on the segments, and so we'll take the whole year.
What the word average?
It will be the whole year, like weekday.
Okay.
That will take for the measure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think when we look at this and we go over it quickly, I don't think you understand the depth of data that's behind these numbers. They're not just made up and not.
Sorry.
There's quite a
I
bit.
was just trying to understand perspective
Yeah.
of what it actually meant. Thank you.
Anyone on the phone have comments or questions?
I would say if anyone's interested in this, take a look at the TMA congestion management process, which goes into these metrics in quite great detail and even introduces some additional ones if you have interest.
Hearing none. Moving on. Any opposed? In the room? Any opposed online?
I see none.
Any abstentions?
None.
So carried. Thank you. Item B. Draft UCTC Resolution 2023-03, allocation of previously unallocated Federal Transit Administration, Section 5307, and formula funds for regional transit projects. Do I have a motion for discussion purposes?
Mike Baden.
I have a Mr. Baden. Do I have a second? Mr. Pine. I have a motion and a second. Brian.
Thank you, Dennis. At the end of 2022 and at the beginning of 2023, the three transportation councils, Dutchess, Orange, and Ulster, met to discuss the use of our funding balance available for programming. At the end of federal fiscal year 22, the TMA, Mid-Hudson Valley TMA, had $12.9 million in 5307 funds available for programming for future transit needs within the region. Therefore, we opened up for internal discussion the opportunity to request funding for transit needs. And the two public operators, Dutchess County Area Transit and Ulster County Area Transit, did make requests. And those requests are detailed in attachment 1. On the page 4 of the attachment, you can find a narrative summary of those requests. I'm going to focus on Ulster County Area Transit's request. The focus of our request is for a total request of $2.2 million that requires a 20% local match from Ulster County. The purpose is for, I'm sorry, no, I misread that. The request is 1.7 million with a $400,000 local match.
Local match.
The total project cost is 2.2 million. This is to continue Ulster County Area Transit's continued process toward fleet electrification. The mix of projects include an expansion of bus electric vehicle charging infrastructure at the UCAT bus facility, as well as charging ports, rooftop solar panels at the UCAT facility, and the purchase of 2 battery electric bus cutaways. The TMA supports the total grant request.
Was there bus shelters in there, Brian?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
No, I would have to look at the full request, but this is just the summary. I don't
Okay.
believe it was in this. But
So I recall asking him to ask for bus shelters. So,
we will look into that.
okay.
Dutchess County's public transit also had a request of 2.4 million for bus equipment, bus engine, and transmission repairs and bus shelters.
And the source of this funds are unallocated 5307 funds, and from the region, and the priority for the use of these funds is for capital improvements. So they're not operational funds; they're for capital improvements.
So we have a comment from the line. If you have a moment, I'm going to bring her over. Laura Petit, I believe, has a comment.
Thank you. And this may be a little off topic since these are for capital improvements, but and I mean, since we are a regional transportation group, when Legislator Erner and Cheryl Snyder and I had met in Walker Valley, there were a lot of comments from the public that were there about transit hubs. And I believe one of the comments, and perhaps Legislator Erner could speak more to this, is that we lose STOA funding if we go outside of Ulster County, and yet we want to start connecting our transportation systems so they become more effective. So again, this may be partially off topic, but I mean, I would like to see that addressed a little bit more as we're enhancing and improving our systems.
Thank you, Laura. Any other comments? Hearing none. In the room, any opposed? Online, any opposed? In the room, any abstentions? Online, any abstentions? So carried. Thank you. I need some more paper. C, update, item C, update of the UCTC Long Range Transportation Plan Financial Plan. This is for discussion purposes only. This has been required by the federal, our review of our triennial review by the Federal Highway Administration and by FTA. They found some issues with the way that the financial plan was essentially addressed in the 2045 transportation plan, which the council adopted. And they issued a request for a corrective action. We have been working with FTA and FHWA with respect to the methodology in terms of how that financial and how to update that financial plan. And then finally, to essentially put the financial plan together. We have agreement from FHWA and FTA with respect to the methodology. And we're fairly comfortable in terms of where we are in terms of the total dollars available. And a lot of those total dollars are available when you look at this are not only coming from federal sources and state sources, but also from local sources as well. We did something called a Sankey chart. Sankey chart. Thank you. I don't know why I want to pronounce that as Sankey. And Brian will we'll run you through how this works and how the methodology works and where we are in terms of that update. Brian?
You're doing great, Dennis.
That was good. I just wanted to say Phineas. That's all I wanted to say.
All right. Well, thank you. As Dennis noted, you can go to the next slide. So the Ulster County Transportation Council Long Range Transportation Plan was originally adopted in September of 2020. And the UCTC is required to update its long range plan every 5 years, and we use a 25-year planning horizon. So that's why in 2020, we are working on the 2045 long range transportation plan. Our next update of the long range transportation plan is due for completion no later than September 30th, 2024. And that would be the 2050 long range transportation plan. As Dennis indicated, we have every 3 years, a triennial review of the TMA is conducted by FTA and FHWA. During this round of the review, they did find one corrective action. And that is an indication that the UCTC is not meeting the full requirements of the program. The corrective action that was found was regarding our long-range transportation plan. Also, Orange County Transportation Council actually had the same corrective action. That is that our LRTP financial plan does not include system-level estimates of cost as required under the code. UCTC must therefore update their LRTP financial plan to fulfill the requirements of the aforementioned regulations and submit those changes to Federal Highway and Federal Transit prior to amending the long-range transportation plan. So steps toward compliance. You can go to the next slide, David. Thank you. The steps we've been taking, we've been working very closely with our advisors at FHWA and FTA to make sure that we can create a long-range transportation plan that meets all the regulations. So the first step was in December of 2022. I had prepared a memorandum, essentially a technical memorandum that I submitted to our partners at DOT, FHW, and FTA for discussion. Essentially, it included a proposed methodology on how we would meet those requirements. Then by February, after the holidays had come to an end, we were finally able to reach consensus on that methodology with some minor revisions. Here we are today in March. We have developed the fully revised Section 8 of the long-range plan, called the financial plan. That's now in front of you for review. By April 25th, which is the policy committee meeting, we would expect and hope after you can take some time to review the document, we would get UCTC policy committee approval. So that's the process that we're following here as we work toward amending or making changes to the LRTP. Let's go back to what the purpose of Section 8 of the financial plan is. Again, going back to the Code of Federal Regulations, development and content of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan includes a lot of different components. A big one is the financial plan, and that is one that demonstrates how the adopted transportation plan can be implemented. The financial plan has essentially two components: system level estimates of costs and revenue sources that are reasonably expected, that's a key word, reasonably expected to be available to adequately operate and maintain federal aid highways and public transportation. So if you go, the current financial plan is in section 8 of the long range plan. This is what it looks like. We did fairly well on our revenue side, but that's as far as we took it in our financial plan. The USDOT did not like the way we estimated costs in the current iteration. Therefore, we really need to put more effort into developing specific costs. So the process going forward would be to update the existing revenues, which was not a huge leap for us because, as I said, the revenues were pretty solid in this current section 8. So then the second step would be to develop system level cost estimates by mode out to the horizon year of 2045. So the different modes that we're considering here include highways, primarily pavements and pavement conditions is what they refer to, and also the maintenance of our highways. Then bridges, transit, public transit, and also non-motorized transportation. With regard to highways, this only includes the federal aid system, so it does not include down to the local level, local streets. Only federal aid highways are included as part of this analysis. The revenue projections, we looked at 35 individual revenue sources that we know are reliably expected to be available to Ulster County municipalities for use on the transportation system. We utilize actual allocations or dollars made available through official budgetary processes taken typically from federal fiscal year 2020. Although we did update some of that revenue based on the new bipartisan infrastructure law, which came into effect in 2022. Actually, it was signed 21. So the first year of revenue was 22. So we do have some revenue sources that we're pulling into this plan from the bipartisan infrastructure law. However, there are entire programs that have not, the rules have not been written. We don't have allocations or sub-allocations for these new programs yet. So we can only make broad assumptions about how much money is going to be made available to us under the bipartisan infrastructure law. But we do expect that this new methodology puts us in very good positioning for the next update, again, due in 2024, to have a very robust methodology for projecting revenue. Running through those revenues relatively quickly, as Cheryl indicated, thanks for your review, Cheryl. I'm glad you're looking at it. We estimate a total amount of revenue for the system at $1.5 billion over the course of the next 25 years. Seems like a huge amount of money. It is a huge amount of money. However, when drawn out over the needs of every mode, it goes quickly. A few other assumptions that we've made: these revenues are presumed to be held flat. So this is a very conservative revenue estimate. We're not assuming huge increases over time and a rosy picture. We're assuming that the money being made available to us now will just continue to be made available at the same level over time, regardless of increasing needs to the system or increasing rates of infrastructure or other outstanding issues.
And that has historically been the case.
That's correct. Over the course of the last decade, our revenue has been held flat, essentially.
And did you include the bipartisan infrastructure act has a substantial amount of discretionary funds?
I'll get to those right
Thank
now.
you.
I'm going to run through these quickly. So looking at Federal Highway Administration revenue, these are our core funding sources that we get allocated to us during every TIP update, as well as several other pieces of revenue that are essentially provided to Ulster County through formula. So it includes off-system bridge funds. It includes Bridge New York funding that is available to us, our STBG funds. And this includes funding that is available also exclusively to New York State DOT to the National Highway Performance Program, which New York State DOT is fully in charge of. So all those funds are brought forward here and projected out. Go to FTA. Our FTA revenue includes, again, formula funding that this very board approves every year. It's our 5307 funding, our 5339 funding that goes toward maintaining the Ulster County Area Transit Capital system, as well as our operations and maintenance. So those dollar amounts are very easy to attain, and then they're just projected outward. Next, we have state revenue sources. These include New York State dedicated funds that the state uses to match their federal aid funds. And it also includes state aid to municipalities in the form of CHIPS, harsh winter paving, the pothole protection program, I think it's called, and several other sources of state aid. And which can be used on culverts as well. That's on the highway side. On the transit side, it includes STOA funds, state operating assistance, as well as the modernization and enhancement program and the accelerated capital transit program. This is funding that's been made available annually, and we projected it outward over the course of 25 years. And then going on to local funds, which are a little more difficult to ascertain. I took a look at municipal budgets in order to try to estimate how much money municipalities are allocating toward the highway system. So for Ulster County, we have a bridge program, and I looked at annual bridge. The bridge program is just around $7 million. For municipalities, the dollar amount is much more difficult to estimate, given that not all of the dollars budgeted at a local level go to the federal aid system. So we took a sampling of our municipal budgets and then only took a portion of that funding and assumed that a small proportion of that funding would go toward the federal highway system, somewhere in the vicinity of 20 to 40% of budgets, depending on if it was a rural or urban municipality. And I also want to point out in the document, the detailed methodology for developing these estimates are laid out in great detail in the document. And then finally, other funding sources for revenue. These include the discretionary funding sources that Dennis had mentioned, funds that we would expect to be able to capture going forward. We can't predict how well we would be in competing for those funds, but if the past is any indicator, we could expect to receive funding from NYSERDA, from New York State DOT Climate Smart Program, which the city of Kingston has used for sidewalks, transportation alternatives, recreational trails programs, private funds, which have been used on the federal aid system for signals, have been used as well, particularly in the area of the mall in town of Ulster. Other bridge funds are very likely going to be needed, local investments in bridges. So these are the, again, 35 individual sources of funds to we identified as potential revenue sources. So that includes the estimate of revenue. The next step, which was the corrective action, is to develop a reliable method for determining cost. Now, I'm not going to go into the detailed methodology for each mode, but again, those methods have been reviewed by Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administration and are detailed in the revised Chapter 8. But we're looking, you go to the next slide, David. For system level estimates of cost, the main subject areas are laid out here. We're looking at federal highway resurfacing. These are pavements on the state federal aid pavements, county federal aid pavements, and local federal aid pavements. safety, bridge replacements, public transit, non-motorized transportation, and other investment areas such as great mobility, which we spoke about previously, system management and operations, which is essentially maintaining the system we have, resiliency, and also safety were some of the areas we looked at. So I think one of the reasons why our original long-range plan fell short is this is a very arcane process. These estimates are difficult to estimate and generate, but we did want to sit down and develop some good methodologies. We looked to our partners in Dutchess County and Orange County, and we're largely using the same types of calculation methods to determine an estimate for cost over time for pavements, an estimate of cost for bridge deck replacements based on a very set formula and calculation. But once that's all done, what do we have? We have a set of numbers that are still very difficult, even for financial planners and transportation planners, to digest and comprehend. So we wanted to utilize some method to try to illustrate these costs and help it make sense to everyone. Go to, yes, the Sankey diagram. This was a method that we saw being used by the Genesee Transportation Council in Rochester through their long-range transportation plan. They used the Sankey diagram, which is essentially a flow chart, but it's a very complicated flow chart. It traces essentially origin and destination of units of measure through a system. Mr. Sankey here, Captain Matthew Henry Phineas Ryle Sankey of the Royal British Corps of Royal Engineers first developed the Sankey diagram as a means to measure energy distribution in freight engines. Nowadays, we can just plug in numbers into some online programs to get the outputs. And we're going to show you those now. So the first, it's a flow chart, it's a bar chart, and it shows the distribution of funds. So if you look at the top of the chart, we estimated over 25 years, a total amount of federal aid of $610 million. And that's distributed primarily from FHWA, but a portion of that is also transit. So the blue shown here is Federal Highway Administration. The pink is Federal Transit Administration dollars. Then going down the bar chart, state aid, we estimate 221 million. Local aid, 450 million. And again, that's distributed between federal aid, FHWA and transit, and then other types of discretionary sources. These are organized by the revenue source. Go on to the next slide, Dave. So there's a lot of programs, 35 different sources of revenue, and those revenue sources have different rules on how they can be spent. Off-system bridge funds can only be spent on bridges that are off the federal aid system. Can't be used any other way. We do not have enough money to spend to meet the needs of our off-system bridges. So we have to cobble together a variety of sources in order to meet the needs of the system for off-system bridges. That's just one example. But what we can see here are the highway programs are shown at the top, and the transit programs are shown near the bottom. Go on to the next slide. And then this is the final step in the Sankey process, that it shows the source of where that revenue ultimately ends up, what specific mode of the transportation system. So we have the highway programs at the top, and they are essentially ordered randomly. I don't want you to read too much into the order, but you can get a sense of the proportion of where the funding is going toward what element of the transportation system. So at the very top, we see state pavements require $194 million. And those pavements are largely paid for through the NHPP program. And then there's funds left over from the NHPP program that can go to other sources like primarily maintenance, system operation and maintenance, resiliency, great mobility. And then go to the next slide, Dave. I'm just going to skip ahead. This is a focus on the federal highway system. Off-system bridges, right in the middle, represent probably the greatest need and expected expenditure that we'll be experiencing in Ulster County in the next 25 years based on our cost estimate.
And that's generally funded at the local level, right?
Exactly. If you look at the fund sources that we're drawing in, we're drawing from close to 15 to 20 different types of fund sources in order to meet those needs. Federal aid only accounts for a small proportion, well, a relatively small proportion of meeting the need of our off-system bridges. In order to make up the difference, we estimate that $39 million is going to be expected. It might not be entirely clear through this diagram, but as much as $39 million will be expected in additional expenditures from local governments in order to meet the needs of our off-system bridges going forward.
Brian, are you surprised the data from, I guess it would be from DOT, of how CHIPS and DOT money in extreme weather is actually spent? There's like each municipality gets a bundle of money assigned for each thing, and they do their projects and they report back on what those projects were at the DOT level. Is that data incorporated into this?
No, not at this time. It can be going forward. At this point, we just assumed that a proportion of CHIPS funding is spent on the federal aid highway system based on eligible expenditures. Yeah, that level of detail is used only at the highest level of metropolitan planning organizations in the U.S. that we found.
Because I would be curious to see, I know like in our town, we had a highway chip plan a few years ago. We started using it for equipment purchases partially, which had never been done in our town before. The previous highway superintendent had only used it for repaving projects and things like that. And I'm just, it's a curiosity more to see what the breakdown. I'm sure the DOT must look at it and how it's spent in some degree.
And I know in the city of Kingston, it's been discussed, there's a great need and desire among taxpayers for improvements to the sidewalk system in the city. 100% of the city's CHIPS revenue is used to maintain its pavement. And very little additional funding is brought in outside of the state aid for pavement. So what we've heard in Kingston from Department of Public Works is, I can't give you CHIPS funding because we need it for sidewalks, because we need it for our pavement. So there are different ways you can use the funding, yes. Just a few more slides. Transit is the next one. No, go back. This shows the full distribution of federal, state, and local funds toward the transit system. So a significant amount of local dollars again. And these are based on real dollars today, based on I used the 2023 Ulster County approved budget. $5 million of local county funds are used to support our transit system with a total annual budget of, I think, $8.5 million. So state and federal aid represents roughly $3 to $4 million of maintaining our transit system. $5 million is spent out of the local coffers. And that's shown here through annual county transit payments go to maintain transit operations, and transit capital, please keep on that slide. Transit capital is cobbled together through a wide variety of sources. Okay, now you can go to the next slide. So just to, in closing, walk you through the documents. I have the detailed cost calculation methods are shown section by section. We just run through these, David, thank you. On how we develop the methodology. So it's very detailed, and it does also follow the methodology that's used by our partners in Dutchess and Orange County as well. In conclusion, Section 8 as revised now meets the requirements of 23 CFR Part 450. And this has already been agreed upon by Federal Highway and Federal Transit, as well as New York State DOT Central Office staff. They concur that this now meets with the requirements. The cost calculations and distribution of revenues while not open to detailed revision at this time, I believe this methodology puts us in an excellent position to have a very robust discussion during the next long-range transportation plan update of how these dollars are distributed and expended over time. That discussion definitely should involve the public. It will involve the public, but it also requires very close coordination with New York State DOT and our federal transit provider, Ulster County Area Transit. And that discussion will begin very likely at the end of this year as we move to update the long-range transportation plan.
Thank you, Brian. Anything else?
That's it.
So in the room, any questions? Online, any questions or comments?
There were a couple of chats that came in through the presentation.
Why don't you read them?
Sure. See if I can do justice to Phil Lerner's comments here. How about downgrading some of the bridges, as many Rondout residents would have preferred the Word Street Bridge, both for reasons of safety, accommodation of non-motor transit, and saving money, or replacing crossings with boats or abandoning some. In Albany County, some bridges have simply been shut down, and not all recently. Laura Petit commented on that. It's my understanding that we have 65 bridges in the county in need of repair. It would be interesting to see how many could be replaced, quote unquote, as walking only or upgrading and widening to include pedestrian/bike.
That's it?
There was a previous comment. This was regarding, I believe, transit earlier. Sorry, it's difficult with the chat to kind of get those in. We do ask for comments as we're going along. And then, chat frequently kind of comes in halfway through of another section. But it was discussing, I believe, the Walker Valley meeting that had happened and use of, state STOA funding when crossing municipalities.
Any comments or questions directly on the methodology that we used and and the results?
I should note with regard to legislator Erner's comment on the Word Street Bridge. The Word Street Bridge is a state project estimated at roughly $48 million. And that includes federal aid and state dedicated funds, I believe a few other funding sources. When you look at our transportation improvement program and the budget figures that are included in that one project was probably 4 times the total budgeted amount in the entire rest of the transportation improvement program. We did not carry those projections, that we didn't allow that funding to skew the projections. I excluded the budget for the Ward Street Bridge out of these projections entirely because it would have made for a much more rosy picture. So the funding for that bridge, while it's high, and one might even argue extreme, particularly at a regional level, it is unique, and it was brought forth essentially through the cooperation of, I believe, Assemblymember Cahill.
There was a
Working
legislative,
very
it was a
closely
legislative
with
preference.
New York State DOT Region 8. So it is definitely unusual to see an investment of that size in our region.
Any questions or comments? So the thought here is if we're going to pass this on to the policy committee.
As long as the technical committee approves.
Any objections to passing this on to the policy committee from in the room? Any objections to passing this on to the policy committee online?
Brian, did we get any sort of feedback if this resolves the questions that were asked about the?
Yeah, as I noted in the conclusions, we have already received concurrence from Federal Highway and Federal Transit that the methodology was satisfactory, and now this document does meet the requirements as written. I think one of the other big conclusions, and this is a discussion that we'll have during the next update of the long range plan, is the need for the local bridges. And I think there's some very good comments that, you know, our bridge crew at Ulster County has done an excellent job in determining and extending the life of bridges. That not all bridges always need to be replaced. There's a lot that can be done to get more out of a bridge. And how those costs are calculated into this calculation, are baked into this calculation. We don't get down into that fine level of decision making, but there is going to be a great need for addressing failing bridges over the next 20,
Well,
30 years.
that's part of the reason I asked the question I asked about the chips and the other, local funding. If we should start, not monitor is maybe the wrong word, but just having the information of where that funding is going, because admittedly it falls to the local highway superintendent to determine and the local town boards to determine how that funding is used, but to have that information available to us might be really helpful in the bigger picture of our state of transportation, given that so many miles of roads throughout the county are local roads. And
1,200.
yeah,
Right, I mean, the methodology that we use to develop these cost estimates, while very coarse, I mean, we, right now, David can pull the bridge rating from the New York State DOT bridge rating system. We looked at poor and fair bridges. That's how we calculated the need. Then we looked at the deck area of all the bridges that are currently rated poor or fair condition. And then we had a general estimate for the amount of money it takes per square foot of bridge to calculate that. So, I can't say that we could produce it immediately, but we can come up with those figures for your local systems as well as needed. To have that discussion, if it would help you to have that discussion with local decision makers, we can bring that data forward.
I think it would, and this is not to set up, a all highway superintendents are the same, but I think it's a fair statement that bridges may be viewed differently than the rest of the road by highway superintendents. Culverts, maybe not so much, but bridges. And I think that's maybe a discussion that needs to be had, and how to keep that moving forward. I mean, Rochester here is a prime example. We applied for a bridge in New York for a local bridge and got it, which I'm told is very unique. And I'm glad we did, because it's a bridge that needs to, replacement. But when you look at the number of stream crossings and things like that in the county that are under local control, it's a serious issue.
Well, and I think, yes, the short answer is yes. I think if there's anything we can take away from this, there's a couple of things I think that you can look at is the federal funding with respect to highways is beginning to, and it started with the FAST Act and it's continuing on. It's focused on essentially the national highway system. It's not focused on state roads and it's not focused on local roads. There's some funding that is shifted over, like off-system bridges funding, et cetera, to deal with those systems, but it's not enough. That's the first thing. The second thing is that if you look at revenue sources and you look at the history of revenue sources, even with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the amount of additional dollars that came down to this MPO and generally throughout the state was generally flat. And the state used that additional money to essentially make up the amount of money that the state was putting in with respect to its system. And they used the federal money to essentially take that burden off the state. And then if you look at the revenue projections that you have versus the costs that you have, the amount of investment that we had to basically, when Brian said that he cobbled together the revenue sources, a lot of those revenue sources that think about this, if you have flat revenues and increasing costs, then a lot of those revenue sources have to come at the local level. So when you start looking through the data and you start piercing through some of the sand key, what you can find is that there's a lot of expectation that in order to meet our general maintenance needs, the local governments are gonna have to provide more of their share of those costs. And I think the example we had with respect to transit was in the timeframe for the 2045. By the time we get to 2045, the investment at the local level in transit costs would be in the neighborhood of about $63 million. So that when you start to think of those things, then you have to start to think about the discretionary funds and how you can utilize more of those discretionary funds relative to helping meet some of the local needs. That includes the local earmarks program or the congressionally directed spending initiatives. It includes a number of the competitive work that's out, the competitive grants that are out there as well. But I think that's the focus here, and in my mind, that's the focus going forward, is trying to figure out where we're going to get where we can help the local governments, including the county, find the necessary funds in order to make sure that we can continue to maintain the system.
And to legislator Erner and Petit's comments again regarding the bridge system, I mean, we're seeing inquiries from municipalities regarding local bridges that serve 2, 3 property owners on dead-end roads. And the bridges are failing and in poor condition and they need funding. And the fact of the matter is that municipalities are going to have to look at creative ways for dealing with these deficiencies going forward. There's going to be more and more of them popping up. And there are no easy answers for especially those low volume bridges in the rural areas. There's going to be some very difficult decisions.
And one of the things that the county did with respect to trying to deal with its costs, and in particular some of its design costs, was the creation of a county bridge crew. I mean, that has literally saved the county millions of dollars with respect to the ability to go in and repair bridges on a regular basis or to replace them if needed, key parts of them. And the idea of moving this program into a cooperative venture at the local level is something that should be considered. We've had this discussion in the past with respect to that. Anyway, I just wanted to go back. Any objections to moving this on? I didn't hear any at the online level. So with that, we will move this to the policy committee for consideration and to get it to the federal government so we can meet our requirements with respect to this corrective action. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. I want to compliment Brian and David with respect to the amount of work and brain power that sort of gets and it sort of gets used in order to work through this in terms of, one, trying to decide how best to present it, and two is then to essentially get all of the parties together so they can agree on a methodology and then present that methodology in a way that, for me, that's meaningful, even if it's Phineas Sankey. I love that name, I really do.
Captain
Phineas Sankey. But my compliments to Brian and David with respect to that, and thank you very much for getting us through this. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And David did a lot of the calculations and analysis in the background as well. Yep, thank you.
So item number 6, other old business project updates.
Project updates, let's see, Route 9W mobility plan is very much underway. We will have the inventory of existing conditions should be made available online to the public next week. And then we'll also be updating the website to incorporate public involvement within the next month or so, like next 4 weeks. So there'll be an ArcHub page developed, which is an interactive website with a survey tool. So it will be a join as you go public workshop is what we're calling it. Essentially, you can log on, review it.
Participate at your own pace.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Participate at your own pace workshop. You can log on, review a brief presentation, roughly 15 minutes on the project, and then there's a survey where you can provide both closed and open-ended question survey, and you can provide input. So we look forward to rolling that out in the weeks ahead. And there'll be other opportunities beyond just that survey tool for input.
Talk about.
David, you want to talk about the
Yeah,
rail
we
safety
had
study?
the Kingston Rail Crossing Safety Study. We had our initial kickoff meeting back on the 16th. From there, we're going to be adding a couple more TAC members just to make sure that we're getting, full comprehensive coverage of the stakeholders that we need on the TAC. We presented our public engagement plan, which we'll be revising, and we're going to look to start our data collection coming in June. We're currently waiting on a revised project schedule for that one, but this project is primarily focused on rail crossing safety, both at grade crossings and throughout the entire corridor. So, people trespassing across the tracks is kind of the focus, and, the surrounding land uses that are driving those decisions to make those crossings, and trying to promote some safety in the corridor. And that way we can hopefully, reduce the number of accidents and fatals that we're seeing.
We have submitted for review to the New York State DOT Transit Bureau a scope of work to conduct a route optimization and technology audit for the Ulster County Area Transit System. So that scope of work is under review, and we would expect to issue the RFP as soon as that is approved. And so we would get that work underway, hopefully late spring, early summer, if we're able to find a consultant that meets the requirements. And then we also will be updating the UCTC website. That contract has been awarded to a firm called Braun Media out of Colony, New York. So we'll be doing a full update to the UCTC website over the course of this calendar year. Then one of the next studies that I hope to progress will be providing complete streets planning assistance to municipalities across the Ulster County. Those are my project updates.
We're also working on a contract for the traffic count program, so we'll be able to get some counts out this spring and into the fall. So it will be a new contract that we'll have to be doing. So we'll be looking if anyone has count locations that they need for a particular project or study. We will have that available. We are also looking at providing some additional safety work that I'm hoping to get going with a scope of work that's going to build on our county road safety plan to make that in compliance with the Safe Streets for All, so that way local municipalities can apply for Safe Streets for All implementation funding.
Is there any update on, I know you had a call for dangerous intersections or dangerous roadways, and I know we submitted a couple directly to you, and that we're going to be incorporated into a generalized plan. Is there any more feedback on that?
I think what we're talking about is that update to that.
Okay.
Yeah, the
Okay.
update of that safety study would take a
Got it.
look at those. And then the reason for that is to make sure that, well, David explained it. I don't need to re-explain.
Okay.
Any
I thought that's what you were talking about, but I wasn't sure. So, yeah.
any additional comments or concerns in the room?
The only other old business is Ulster County Traffic Safety Board is scheduled to meet on April 10th. We usually meet on the first Monday. This is the second Monday of April, rescheduled due to conflicts. 6 p.m. Ulster County Legislative Chambers. Traffic Safety Board. The agenda should be posted this time next week on the
Thank you, Brian.
Traffic Safety Board webpage.
Any comments or concerns online? Hearing none, thank you all.
Thank you.
UCTC policy will be meeting on April 25th.